session, where we talk about topics covering connecting, streaming, and delivering, and all things live streaming. Now, whether you're new to webcasting or been a professional for some time in the space, the goal of this channel is to collaborate, learn from others, to help us grow in what we do, and learn about new technologies that might be coming about in the industry as well, and creators. Now, please remember, if you like or enjoy today's video, please hit that like button. It'd be great to have you as a subscriber as we look to grow this channel as well. In this session, we have David Ronca back with us that previously spoke on the topic of AV1. Look for a link to the video here to learn more. This will be more of a fireside chat where we get to learn more about David and his experience at Netflix, in the industry, efforts in video and streaming. So I'm really looking forward to this and hearing more about David's background as he shares with us all. Let's chat with David right now. Well, welcome, David. So great to have you back with us again in another session, and appreciate your time. In the previous one, we talked about AV1 and where you were able to give the audience, and that actually did very well for those who are watching. If you make sure that they can go back and see that, where you kind of talked about the directions of that. But in this session, I kind of mentioned in the intro with the viewers is that we kind of want to have more of maybe like a fireside chat and just bring you back, and you have an extensive background and experience, and I thought it'd be great to have you kind of come on and share a little bit about that with everybody. And so in starting this off, you kind of having a history, but one of those parts of your history in terms of your experience and what you did was at Netflix, and kind of how that got started. Maybe we can start from there in that particular area for you and about that.
Sure, John. And first, I just want to thank you for having me back. I really love these talks, the casual format and relaxed environment. So it's a lot of fun for me and hopefully for you too as well.
Absolutely.
So I was at Netflix for 11 and a half years, starting in November of 2007, which was shortly after they released their very first streaming application. And it was very crude and hacked. It was an Internet Explorer plugin, and you could only use it on Windows using IE. And so when they hired me, because I had been working in Microsoft technologies since I graduated from college, more or less, starting in the 80s. So I was DOS, Windows 95, Windows NT, Windows XP. I mean, literally all the way through. And so, and also in the media domain. So I was hired because I was a Windows expert, and they wanted to do version 2 of the streaming application. Well, as we were working on it, we hired another engineer, and he was hired and ended up working on this new Microsoft technology called Silverlight. And one of the first things about Silverlight, the promise, was it was going to be platform independent. So not only would it run on any browser in Windows, it would also get you onto the Mac. Mm-hmm. And so we were both working. We had 2 different projects going. And by May of 2008, my colleague, Anthony Park, who's quite well known now for his work at Netflix, had a very good demonstrable application in Silverlight showing not just good playback, but adaptive bitrate. So it was our first adaptive bitrate implementation. And I know when I saw that, I thought to myself, wow, this is cool. And in my next one-on-one with my boss, Kevin, he was a VP of engineering. I just told him, after seeing this demo, I'm not sure that the project I'm working on makes sense. And in fact, about a week later, he called the team into his office and he said, and he was so gracious. He said, we're going to kill this project. You guys have been doing great work. We love you. This was in May. He says, we'll give you until November to find something new to do at Netflix. And if you haven't found a new role by then we're going to let you go. I mean, wow. Think about 6 months, right? 6 months being at Netflix with just being there. Okay, fine, go find some work. And, it's the hardest part with companies like Netflix or these big companies is getting in the door. Now you're in the door, they're saying, just go find something to do.
Wow.
So, the first thing I had was this huge paranoia issue because I realized that I was obsolete. My skills that had defined me for like the first 15 years of my career were suddenly obsolete and had no value, and everything was shifting to web, shifting away from Windows applications and Windows APIs into web, and all the platform neutral implementations, HTML, web, Silverlight in this case.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was just like, I told my wife, I said, I'm obsolete, and so, but there were some problems they had with, they were trying to do AVR on Silverlight, and there were some problems with the streams. And so I went and sat in Anthony's cubicle, and I just straight out told him, I'm not leaving until you give me work to do. And I had told my boss, I'm not going to work on this dead project for another day. And then I went and sat in Anthony's cube and refused to leave until he gave me a project. And he said, well, we're trying to do adaptive streaming, and we're having some issues with the alignment in these files. These were the old Microsoft Windows Media files. He said, we need a tool that can take these after we apply DRM and realign it so that it worked properly. So I wrote a tool to fix these streams so they could be, they would work with AVR. And then I went on to do some of the Silverlight work, some of the dialogues. I did an API so that Silverlight could be hosted by other Windows applications. And then I was actually working on that for a while, and I was digging it. It was fun. It was new. I felt like I'm learning something new, getting relevant again, getting current. And then we had this big project land. So the backstory is that in late 2008, we launched on Xbox, which was a big game changer for Netflix for streaming. And but that Xbox deal came with a catch. There was a 2-year lockout. For the first year, we could not run on any game console. Mm-hmm. For the second year, it couldn't be in memory. It had to be like a disk based. So you had to load the application. And then to make things more complex, Sony had the PS3, but they also had their studios, and they had their own vision about what the PS3 media playback environment was going to look like. And so we were trying to figure out how we could get onto the PS3. Well, it turns out the PS3 wasn't just a really powerful game box in its day. It was also the single most powerful Blu-ray player on the planet. And Blu-ray has Blu-ray Java. It's got all these capabilities for applications. And so a few of us, it was actually 3 of us to be exact, got the Blu-ray spec, and we spent the next 6 months building an adaptive bitrate streaming implementation on Blu-ray. So we had a disc.
Wow.
And so we distributed this Blu-ray disc to our users. You put it into your PS3, it would boot up a Netflix application. And the only thing on the disc was a bootloader. It would go out the Netflix site, pull down the latest Blu-ray Java, and it would boot that up as a player. It was crude, but it worked. That really kind of opened the door, got us into Blu-ray, and got us into Sony. I mean, into the PS3. Like a year later, we had a native PS3 app that was in memory, and so it was exciting. It was a really fun project. Blu-ray was not supposed to be able to do this. The features they built for what they call progressive playlists, the system they built was for like movie trailers. Like, you could put in your disc and you don't have to have permanent trailers burned on the disc. You could download them and play them, fresh trailers, over time. But we managed to hack it and build a complete streaming implementation on the system they built for trailers, for viewing trailers. So it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, and it was breaking a lot of rules.
Yeah, sounds like, well, in that instance where you had kind of the PS3 and doing that, was there a requirement that the PS3, obviously it's already connected to a network at at the location, right? So was it going out and obviously downloading this online from?
Yeah, it was. I mean, the PS3, obviously you had to have a networked PS3, and just once you put it in a disc, you would just see it loading, and then the Netflix app came up, and like I said, it was a little crude. We could do HD or SD. We couldn't go from one to the other without resetting the player. There were some other kind of limitations, but it really worked. And what was I think the funniest moment, we had a few issues where we were trying to understand the spec, because what we delivered to the player had to be 100% Blu-ray compliant, or the player would choke. And so the tools we built they had to produce accurate Blu-ray streams or it wouldn't work. And I remember we were working on one aspect of it, and one of my colleague, Scott, had emailed the Blu-ray team at Sony, because Sony kind of had a team whose job was really build and promote Blu-ray. The standard Blu-ray
Right.
is a standard. And he sent them a question. We have some problems, and they answered back and said, "Blu-ray was not designed to be used like this. Please stop."
Yeah.
But we didn't.
I
We
can
didn't
imagine.
stop, and it was an incredibly fun project. I personally wrote the back end tools that took the audio and video and prepared them to be delivered to the client. So once again, I was writing bitstream parsers, packaging tools. I wrote a Blu-ray muxer, and so that I kind of found myself, just like with Silverlight, working on the media layer on the back end. My intention was to go back to Silverlight because I was really kind of digging getting like built-in application, this new web UI. And so I was on loan to build these media tools for the PS3. And then I was supposed to I was going to go back, and I agreed to help hire my replacement. So as we're wrapping up and shipping Sony the PS3 app, now I'm starting to interview. We need to find somebody to replace David so David can go back and work on Silverlight. And there's a funny backstory. One of the people I interviewed was a young woman fresh out of college named Ann Aaron, and she was very junior. But I locked on to her, and I told the manager, "Look, she doesn't have a lot of experience, but she is sharp. She is good." Well, she turned me down. She went to another startup, and I told her that startup was going to fail, and I was right. And then 2 years later, when the startup failed, actually they were acquired by Cisco, and then they failed. I heard through the grapevine Ann was looking for a job, and then I went and hired her as the second person on my team, because in between there interviewing people, I realized that I was really good. I was the one person at Netflix that understood media at what I'll call the system level. What do I mean by this? I mean, when you encode a video or an audio, you have the output as an elementary stream. And then you take those and you put them in a container, be it MP4 or a transport stream or whatever. You apply DRM. That's the system layer, starting from the output of the encoder and ending with a stream that can be played back on a device. And so this was this was where I was really, really, really good. And I had that skill prior to Netflix from InterVideo. And I realized, there's one place I can really, really add value, and that's in this tools group. And so I told the hiring manager, "Hey, look, I think I'm going to take this role." And so I was employee number one for the media, or encoding tools is what we called ourselves, ET. And then, of course, a year later, or so, year and a half, 2 years later, I hired Ann, and she was really employee number two of Netflix Modern Encoding Technologies team. And then we built the team out from there. So, and I always joke with her that if she would have accepted my first offer, I would have been working for her.
So it kind of worked
out. And her reply to that was, "Yeah, but David, you were trying to give me a job you didn't want. That wasn't a very compelling sales pitch." I'm like, okay. So
yeah,
a lot of great respect for Ann. We worked together for many years. When I left Netflix, she took over my team, and we just had an incredibly successful working relationship. All the great stuff that we did, at Netflix was really primarily driven by Ann and I working together. Great ideas, whoever had the idea, we managed to work together and get these things built and deployed. And so it turned out to be a really good relationship. We built a really strong team. So, but it started out with a job I didn't want.
Wow, that's an incredible story. I think people obviously who have obviously followed Netflix and used Netflix for a number of years now, from when they started to where they're at today. But that's an incredible kind of understanding kind of a little bit more of the history, and seeing how it kind of developed. And I think it's interesting how sometimes these technologies come within the industry, as you know, and we all know, within the industry itself, are disruptive. And come in at a certain point, and some go away, and some stay, and some end up, taking a life of its own. And so, that is incredible. So, in thinking, kind of leading on to the next part of our conversation here, as you've kind of went through that experience, you know, maybe cover some efforts that you see and the focus that have really kind of progressed in the industry from when you were at Netflix to where we're at now, and
Yeah,
kind of where things have kind of moved to the next step.
of course. And it's just kind of how you have problems, and when you start solving problems, you realize that solving the first problem, climbing that first mountain, and then behind you is a taller mountain. So
Hmm.
in 2010, one of the things we were already encoding in Amazon Cloud. We were probably one of the first. I think it's safe to say Netflix was the first true cloud encoding system, at least any one of any scale.
Wow.
And, but we were. It took a long time to encode a video. Like a
Hmm.
2-hour movie could take 36 hours to encode, and we just
Hmm.
had this trouble. It was always frustrating, and I just thought, like, this has to be. We have to be able to solve this problem. And so in 2010, I did some preliminary work. My idea was, if we ran a complexity analysis of the video, we could then break it up into small pieces and distribute it across many cloud instances and run this encode in parallel and pull it back. And so,
Hmm.
and that was the first really big idea. And it kind of sat dormant until Ann joined the team and another developer, Brian Feinberg. And then the three of us really worked hard to build out parallel encoding, what we called Maple, massively parallel encoding. And massively, it wasn't quite so massive, but because we were using like 3-minute chunks. But still, it was a big breakthrough, and all of
Hmm.
a sudden we got down from 36 hours to, maybe like 5 or 6 hours. And then, and not only that, because we were doing small pieces, you know, um, if you had a failure at 35 hours into a 36-hour encode, then you had to restart and do that all over again. And our
Oh, wow.
systems were unstable. We were moving fast, and like we were shipping or redeploying like every 2 or 3 days. So we would have all this work that would get three-fourths done and get stopped and then start again. So when we rolled out parallel encoding, it really fixed that problem. The next
That.
big problem we saw once we had this working was, we've got a very, agile encoding system, but we're trying to make decisions that could impact our users, kind of raise quality. And we would sit in the cubicle with two monitors and argue over which one looked better. And when we had a lab, and we would let and like, hey, we're going to try this new codec recipe, and it was just like, it was ridiculous. And
Hmm.
I kid you not, we sat one time with some executives in the cubicle, and a few of the executives spent like 20 minutes debating each other of which one, and we paused, we zoomed in there, and I'm like, this is crazy, you
Yeah.
know. And the problem was, there was really no way to measure the quality of the encodes we were producing. I think you know where this is going. I was
Hmm.
having lunch with a friend of mine, Raul Diaz. I was complaining about this problem. We don't have any good scalable way to measure video quality so that we could really start improving our algorithms. And he said, we had a former colleague from InterVideo, Professor Kuo at USC, said, you need to go talk to Professor Kuo. So we reached out to him, and he had this idea, a research grant proposal for this quality metric, and we funded that. And in a few years, we released VMAF, which the goal of VMAF was, first of all, we needed a metric that was scalable, that we could run, that we could start generating, I mean, the way I explain it is, if I have two videos and I'm testing and I see improvements in gain, that's not necessarily, it could even be 20% or something. That doesn't
Hmm.
mean much. But if I test 5,000 and I see an improvement of 3 or 5%, that's an average over a lot of videos. That's a big movement. And so VMAF gave us this ability, but we also wanted it to be open source, royalty free, and so we set it up that way, released it to the industry, and it's been a very, it's not the perfect quality tool or quality metric. It has edge cases and possibilities of exploiting, but if you use it right, use it properly, it helps you, really helps you deliver high quality video at scale and make good decisions. So that was kind of the problem, that solving one problem exposes the next big problem. So once we had VMAF and parallel encoding, then we were able to start doing a whole bunch of experimentation. And if you have some of the talks we've had about the encoding models we use, they were based on that platform we built. If I could encode very quickly, and I could measure the results with good accuracy. And it's subjective. Again, VMAF subjective. So it tries to model the metric as how a user would perceive the quality. So,
wow, and I think that's true for, kind of having people getting more of the background and the context of appreciating when we talk about quality of experience, right? And the visual aspect and the work and the effort and time that you just kind of, were appropriately kind of painted the picture of, like, really trying to identify how do we improve these certain areas. And there's a lot of complexity obviously behind it in terms of video quality and how you measure that and developing that. And I think this is one of the areas that, hopefully the viewers will take back kind of the appreciation of the fact that, how we've kind of moved forward so much from when you were starting on it and working on those areas and part of the project to where we're at today, right? And looking at what we can develop and streamline in terms of, when we mention those terms, quality of experience and quality of service, right? And that, when you're picking in an encoder and you're using a specific codec to support that streaming video stream, that you want to make sure that you're utilizing something that's going to provide the right level of delivery and then quality at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, streaming video, you do have to make trade-offs, but you always want your trade-offs to deliver the optimal possible experience for any given user in their situation. Mm-hmm. The limiting factors, the available bandwidth, the device they're playing on. There's many limiting factors, but the ultimate goal is to deliver the best possible quality for any user given their playback scenario.
Absolutely, absolutely. So in taking that kind of those efforts and again jumping ahead in another area is as you've worked on this, as you've kind of seen the industry grow and you've been involved in some of these key projects with Netflix and others, that where do you see the key focus heading now in terms of when we talk about video production and streaming? Obviously last year was kind of another leap year in terms of some efforts because of the pandemic and things that were taking place. Do you see things kind of moving ahead in terms of, do you have any insights to share with the viewers that you see, kind of directionally speaking of where things are going and areas of improvement, things that, are good, not so good?
Well, I mean, that's a good question. One thing I will say is, a few years ago, Netflix was pretty much a standout in terms of quality. And if you go back and, I'll go ahead and own this. If you go back and look at some of my snarky comments on LinkedIn about Disney before they launched, that I believe that because, it goes some history. Disney acquired the MLB platform and it was all kind of optimized for real-time encoding. And I remember HBO tried to use that as a launch and, their original streaming, and it was really bad. And mm-hmm. So I was pretty snarky and like, oh, Disney's going to come out. Don't expect them to have great quality like Netflix, a bit of arrogance, a bit of, like nobody's as smart as we are, I think. But Disney came out, they launched, I bought it. Of course, I signed up. I needed to just for, understand the competition. And the first movie I watched was streaming in Dolby Vision, and it was stunning. And I'm thinking like, okay, when Netflix launched Dolby Vision, nobody else had, and it was stunning. But I realized, okay, we kind of, we did blaze a trail. But at the end mm-hmm. of the day, the quality of experience, we helped the industry get better. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, the industry has gotten really, really good. So now if you look at the various premium VOD services, you tend to see you're getting parity around quality. So the quality of service, the adaptive streaming, everything, it all tends to work really well. Mm-hmm. Or at least I will say in my home with my home internet, because I've never watched Disney on the road or cell, it works. Their parity is very good. And I think that basically, like, the industry is getting really, really good at delivering quality video. So that's kind of a solved problem, at least for the video as we understand it today. Obviously, if we end up having like true immersive holograms or holodecks, or who knows what the future could hold, then it's a whole new ball game. But as far as delivering like linear video, premium video studio content on demand, I feel like the problem is mostly solved. There's going to be some new challenges. Maybe we'll get some improvements I'm not that excited about 8K because I only have a 65-inch TV, but maybe one day I'll have a 300-inch TV and I'll be excited about 8K.
Right.
So I think now it gets on obviously the quality of content really, really matters now. And then I think that as we're getting better, remember from in economics or business classes, or that as things as more and more competitors get into a market, things tend to get commoditized, right? And so video encoding is now what was once considered like almost a black art. Like, I mean, in the from 2000 to 2010, like if you could produce, the encodes like that were produced for Netflix first streaming app were almost, they were running in some handcrafted, batch files running on a few servers, in a room. And you had one person who was like this, almost like a wizard, this black art of being able to set the right codec settings to deliver a good experience. At this point, the problem is very well understood, and it's being commoditized so that everybody's going to be great at video. And you're going to have the service. You look at all the service providers that are providing video, either encoding or video on demand as a service. I mean, Amazon has channels, right? So, they've got Prime, which is a great experience, but then you can also, they have HBO and Epics and all these other add-on channels. So, I mean, it's getting commoditized. And what does this mean? I think this, for people in my industry, it means, okay, now we're past the hard work of just getting this stuff to work well. And as you get into commoditization, now efficiency matters, cost matters, right? And so we have to get better at producing high quality encodes at lower cost, as margins would be necessarily getting squeezed.
Absolutely. Well, and I think as you kind of talk about that in terms of the overall infrastructure and some of the changes or the elements, right, the bits and pieces that are comprising to, kind of work on the next iteration of some of the things, we see other changes happening in terms of how we also record and capture in a studio, or how we deliver it in terms of more social content that you've kind of that you're kind of looking at, and how we distribution. And certainly Disney, absolutely, with Disney Plus and other areas of that space over the past year or 2 years now, is now just progressively growing and more, whereas more of these unique, what used to be on satellite or used to be on these certain specific cable networks now has moved to more of a pay-as-you-go. You pay for this service, and you have access to all of this vast content to be able to view, right? And being able to do that and provide that. So that's, absolutely. And that's incredible to think about, as we think about that, of kind of where that's going. One area is maybe, is there an environmental impact of video processing, in terms of one of the things we look at running this efficient data centers and streamlining activities and various things that, go along with the process. Obviously, as people like Amazon, Microsoft, and many others out there, and Google, build these, specific data centers to drive some of the infrastructure behind it to provide some of these services. Is there something in terms of video processing where, like you said back in the early day, you had quite a bit, there was a lot in play to run that from a Netflix perspective. Now we're kind of doing that. Go ahead.
And in the early 2000s, everybody had their own data centers, and people were talking about the cloud, right? Even Netflix, when I joined it, they had their own data centers, right? And they migrated to Amazon starting in like, video encoding was the first Netflix application running in EC2, followed by a pretty aggressive push for the entire Netflix backend. There were many reasons why cloud made sense, right? I mean, it costs a lot of money to build a data center, and then you have to build it efficiently, and you have to scale. What about global? Every country. And these are problems like, Netflix probably would have gone bankrupt rather quickly had they tried to build out billions and billions and billions of dollars worth of global data centers, right? But they didn't. They said, well, we'll share with Amazon or with all the other companies that are using Amazon. We'll let Amazon do this, and they can monetize it across companies. So that made a lot of sense. And then we had a few things working in our favor through the early 2000s. Moore's law was still, we're still seeing better CPU performance, every couple of years, doubling. And then we started getting cores. And then one thing that the cloud data centers, as they started building out, obviously power consumption became a problem. And they got really, really, really good at building very incredibly optimized, power optimized data centers, moving from spinning drives to CCDs, I guess, flash, passive cooling, high density. I mean, so they just got really, really good at maximizing the compute delivered for a watt of energy. But I think that Moore's law has been dead for a long time. Mm-hmm. And I think the data centers, they've really kind of maxed out on the easy wins for designing a data center to be like incredibly energy efficient. So now as we grow, we're just going to see energy consumption growing. And I had read a report in 2019, roughly 3% of all global energy was consumed by global data centers. By 2025, it was projected to be north of 20%. That's a really, really large growth, 20 to 25%. That's a pretty aggressive curve. And I think we have to be honest, like, okay, where's that going? Well, a lot of it's going to support all these web services and stuff, but I think more and more compute is being spent doing on video in two areas, video compression and video understanding, the ML, right? All the, and remember when we talk about video, we're not just talking about premium VOD content, which is a relatively small slice of the video pie. We're talking about all the user video. We're talking about, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, everybody. We're also talking about all the security video, all the car cams, there's cameras, video going everywhere, and it's all being uploaded to the cloud. And so I think if you look at video in the aggregate, it's a pretty dirty business, right? Mm-hmm. It's easy to point a finger at oil companies or whatever, but I think if you look at video and its growing power, it's a very power hungry ecosystem. We don't like to think of it this way, but it is, I think, a little dirty. And I think that also, we have to think of it in the aggregate. Just like, if we're worried about the smog in LA, I can't say, well, hey, I'm just one person. I'll let the big rich people worry about trimming their pollution. I don't have to worry about it. I think in order for us to tackle this problem, it's a macro problem the video industry faces. We have to get much, much more efficient in how we manage and process video. And so I think that's going to be a big challenge for us going forward. It's an exciting challenge. And I think there's a lot of opportunity through ASIC, through custom ASICs. At this point, video compression, at least, the long tail of it, it's H.264, HEVC, VP9, and now AV1. These can all be brought onto ASICs where you can encode video at like a fraction of the power requirement. I think the same thing with the machine learning video understanding. You can bring the convolutional networks onto ASICs and drive that power consumption down. So I think these are some of the things that we'll, as an industry, we'll be really looking at over the next few years. And so, it's exciting. Solving big problems are always exciting.
Hey, I want to thank David again for his time today and sharing information with us and his background, and just really taking the time where we can learn more about David. If you have any comments or feedback, share your feedback with us. Leave a comment. Let us know. Love to hear from you. Again, if you're not a subscriber today, love to have you as a subscriber to this channel. And if you like this video, please make sure to hit the like button. Share it if you would be so willing to do so as well. And we look forward to talking to you in the next Chalk Talk session. So stay safe, stay well.